Nakpaga, a 14-year-old SS1 student of Premier Academy Abuja, who on the 22nd of June tragically died after going into a coma at a private hospital in Abuja. Our investigation begins in Karen's home located in Gwarimpa, Abuja. We're met by her mother, Vihimga Vivian Nakpaga. She had been managing Karen's type 1 diabetes since she was diagnosed at the age of 9. According to her, her late daughter was raped and sodomized while she was still in the custody of her school, Premier Academy, Abuja. She claims her child was not healthy when she picked her up from school 2 days before her death. And when she was rushed to the hospital the day after she came home, a sperm-filled condom was found in Karen, which allegedly infected her, causing sepsis, which eventually killed her. As we go up the stairs into her bedroom, the house Karen lived in is still fresh with memories of her. Her clothes, her shoes, her diary with plans for the summer, and her Bible, where she marked Job 3:25.
I have asked them for the medical report, but they said it's not for them to give me the medical report. I should go meet the doctor. The doctor said it was the police that authorized for the medical report. It's unethical that they're investigating and he will give me the medical report. I just want to know what happened to her and then prevent this from ever happening to another child in that school.
Human rights activists have been protesting Karen's death since it hit social media. Just like her mother, they believe the school is using the police to cover up what really happened to Karen while she was in school. And they've ambushed the executive director of the National Human Rights Commission about to conduct a different event here, asking that an independent investigation be carried out by the commission.
We will look into this, and if it warrants the processes you have outlined, the commission will do what is necessary.
The activists are led by this man, Mr. Lemi Uhegbe. Lemi tells us he's being followed and is afraid for his life and that of his family. At first it felt like he was just being paranoid. But just when we were set to leave the commission, Lemi is accosted by a masked woman with a security personnel who, upon seeing our cameras, refuse to identify themselves and vacate the scene.
Madam, would you like to introduce yourself so you can give us what your thoughts are? Let's find out what's going on.
We bring the accusations by the human rights activists alleging a cover-up by the police to the police headquarters.
The autopsy was conducted. And like I stated earlier, a matter of this kind will require expertise and procedures. So we await the outcome.
In search of more answers, we head to the school, Premier Academy. We are met by the school management, headed by the school principal, Mr. Chris Akinsonwo.
From the report from the parent, it was said that a decayed condom was found, and then a live spermatozoa. We look at both of them. Do they really add up?
Unknown to the school authorities, prior to this visit by our crew, we'd been anonymously informed of the case of a physical and health education teacher who was suspended indefinitely in February of this year for sexual harassment.
A teacher was engaging students in some discussion that is not supposed to be. So at that point, we pick it up, it was investigated, and it was made to face disciplinary committee.
The school shows us CCTV footage showing Karen leaving the school to meet her mother 2 days before she died. They claim the video proves Karen was in perfect health before she was picked up by her mother. Karen was rushed to the hospital a day after she came home from school. The doctor who examined her has refused to speak to the press on the alleged condom found in her and what could have possibly caused her death. With the autopsy still pending, we decided to seek a second opinion from another doctor.
If the person's sugar is actually very, very high, that 2 days is even enough to take the person off. If the person has been passing urine, I hope that I don't expect to see any sperm in the urine.
Back at the school, we're taken to Karen's hostel, where she slept and spent time with her classmates. There are no winners or losers in this case. What's ultimately happened is that a child, a 14-year-old child with such a bright future, has died. A school conflicted with keeping its image of being the best boarding school in the FCT. A mother grieving for the death of her child. Ultimately, what everybody wants is that if this act really did happen to this girl, that the perpetrators are brought to justice and Karen's memory lives on. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Indeed, good morning from the FCT. You know, sometimes you have to ask if one can still greet after you've listened to certain stories. But yes, it's still going to be a good day. So good morning from here in the Federal Capital Territory. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde. It definitely is a touching one. I don't even know where to begin, Maokwe. I mean, speaking as a parent, speaking as a father, I don't know where to begin.
I think that we're all sort of confounded, and when you hear stories like this, you have to ask, you know, where do we go to for justice? It's not like as if the life of this young lady can come back. It can't, sadly. We wish it could. But then somebody was responsible, you know, for getting her to this state. Between the school and the few days that she spent at home, you know, with her mom, there are huge questions. She barely spent 48 hours with her mother before she eventually passed on. And there is an investigation currently ongoing, which the police is supposed to be on top of. We sincerely hope that in this particular matter, that they will stay on top of it, that all the secrecy around it, because as a parent, I can only imagine that mother's grief. You know, that first and foremost, you rush your child to a hospital. They start investigations before you say, Jack, baby, daughter is gone, and then you want to know what exactly transpired. You know before now that she already had diabetes. She was diagnosed at the age of 9, and you've been managing it for at least 5 years. The school which she was attending was in the know. They say that, oh, they have been giving her medicine almost every day. So when this young girl decides to go home, what made her want to go home? Why did she keep asking to go see her mom? It's a pretty lengthy story that our correspondent Kayla Megwa did, and I was privy to some of the backstory. That's why I'm able to fill in the dots here. You know, there are huge questions there. A child doesn't just wake up and say, I'm going home when it's not yet time for you to go, or when your mates are in, you know, all closing at the same time. As we did see in the CCTV footage, she was being picked up by her mom alone. So something was wrong. What exactly transpired? I mean, is the school coming clean? Is the mother telling it all? And how soon would the police be able to say, this is what actually transpired? I mean, the mother would like to know right now, and I'm sure many people too would like to know what could have transpired, because the mom's concern right now is that this must not happen to another young child. And I'm sure that is what these kinds of things are about. When justice is done to the memory of a child, it is something that should put some closure, give the parents, those who are grieving, closure to know what happened to their daughter. And it's also another thing for people who still have children in boarding schools all across the country, because this can happen, you know, it can happen at home, it can happen in schools. But for, you know, society in general to be aware and to be cautious, because we still have many more young ladies, you know, who could be vulnerable to things like this. So I'm sincerely hoping that the police will not let us down on this one. We have made many strides when it comes to sexual and gender-based violence. And I believe that this particular death falls under that category. If there's a lot of secrecy and a lot of, you know, carefulness in its investigation, I want to believe that it's because the best will eventually come out of it. Let's not forget that just last year, we lost a number of people who are still very fresh in our memories. That in Edo State, there's also a lady who died in Ibadan, whose name I'm trying, Barakat, yes, whose name I just remembered now, in Ibadan. There are people who lost their lives to this cause. For us to be able to declare this matter, that sexual and gender-based violence, a state of emergency. We were able to declare a state of emergency on it last year. Federal Executive Council did. So did the Nigeria Governors Forum. There have been some strides in that respect on this particular matter till now. And I believe that that emergency, that state of emergency should continue to, yield results. So we want to believe that the police will give top-notch attention to this, and that the investigation would not be bungled, and that whatever eventually comes out, the society is eventually made aware, and that, this young lady's death will not have been in vain. Ayo.
Yeah, one question that continues to come to my mind is, look, the mom is right now not just grieving, but she's also afraid that maybe she caused it. What is it that I may have done as a parent that could have made my child so vulnerable and all of that? That question is still on the mother's mind. And I am hoping that at least we can be sensitive to that as parents. And then what exactly is at stake here? The student of a school died, and what is the primary concern of the school? These are huge concerns, and I don't know how importantly we consider these things, but you know what? We're just going to have to keep doing what we have to do to make sure the issues are brought to the fore and not just swept under the carpet. But so many other issues are on the front pages of the dailies this morning. Let's begin with the Guardian newspaper. Right there, you'll find Nigeria-Benin border stalemate. Manufacturers, importers stranded over 6.5 million naira duty on transit goods. That's the lead of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And guess what we also find there? Stalemate enters 46 days of a border closure. Shortage of raw materials might worsen. Consumers to pay more amid inflation. Exactly what does this mean? All of this you'll find on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. It continues on the inside pages. And, well, we don't have it, but you'll get to see this one hopefully later on. That's the Guardian newspaper for now. Okay.
Let me quickly run through the leadership for you. And of course, there's some story to share, some news to share. After 20 days in the dungeon, tears of relief. Yeah, that's the front page of the leadership for you this morning. Tears of relief as 28 abducted Bethel students reunite with families. Parents recount ordeal. 87 others still in captivity. Banditry will consume the north, Matawale warns. Investment in youth will check insecurity. That's according to Masari. But you can see the faces of these children. You know that they've been through hell and back. And to think that there's still 87 others still in captivity, wow. At least we have these ones back in the meantime. I'm sure that, the kind of relief that washed over the parents, only God will be able to, quantify their joy. But we continue to pray with those whose children are still in captivity and hope that they will be back home soon. Look at this one too. Okonjo-Iweala, Abike Dabiri push for diaspora voting. Yes, indeed. Yesterday was Diaspora Day, and there was some celebration here in Abuja, and of course some push for more roles for Nigerians in diaspora who already contribute humongously to the Nigerian economy. Leadership, Tokyo Olympics coverage excites fans. So that's them praising themselves there on the front page. There's a page for it. Yes, Nigeria is in Tokyo, and as much as possible, we need to be able to get news of our people and how they're faring from Tokyo back to Nigeria. A number of other stories on the corner here, but look at this. INEC, NSA, others got 76 billion naira without NAS approval. That's according to the Senate. Says electoral umpire received 10 billion naira to finance 2015 polls. Well, let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
There's a rather disturbing one on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, and I don't even know what one is going to make of it. Will this help to track the criminals? Kidnappers in FCT begin collection of ransom through banks. Yep, that's what you have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. And the writers go, how we are made to make deposits, victims' relatives, banks not helping matters, victims. And there is something in parentheses you will find on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, what government is doing. Find out all of that on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. And I don't even know what to make of this. Kidnappers are now collecting ransom through banks. Very, very interesting. That's it, right on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. And you know what? You do the rest of the honors yourself. The story continues on page 5. And there's that unfortunate one also on the front page. 25 die in Kano Bauchi road crashes. And the story is on page 7. We've talked about it so many times, I don't even know what to make of it. ASU threatens strike over FG's failure to implement agreement. By now, one would have thought we're way past this. But that's what you have on page 13 of the Daily Trust newspaper today. That front page comment right under the nameplate, front page comment says, they are terrorists, not bandits. The story continues on the inside pages, page 16 to be exact. That's the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
Well, let's look at the Abuja Inquirer this morning, and what they're trying to do is shock you. They say shocking. 63% Abuja traffic lights non-functional. Motorists, vandals to blame. That's according to FCTA. What did motorists do? They made them stop working? I don't know. You might want to read the story. Abuja tops in accident stats. And this is despite the fact that we have pretty good roads here. So sometimes when people say that good roads are not exactly the problem, it's how we drive on these roads that are the problem. Then you have to take a second look at how we're driving and what is happening on our roads. Only recently, I can give you this one, only recently, many more traffic lights were installed across the FCT, particularly in Abuja Municipal. So this particular investigation should shock anyone who lives in the federal capital. Maybe not shock you, but because this is something you encounter almost every time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but 63% Abuja traffic lights non-functional. I'm sure they've done the investigation. You might want to read details on page 3 of the paper. They also have this, joy, tears as bandits release 28 Bethel students, hold 80. So sometimes the figure varies, but 80 is what is here. Man beats living lover to death over phone charger in Abuja. That's also on the front page. Cholera, panic as death toll hits 60 in Abuja. It's a page 5 read there. We'll have to leave it there for the paper.
Nigerian News Direct this morning is talking about money. 280th MPC meeting. Mixed reactions trail cut in CBN's interest rate. Other parameters. And that story's on page 3. Formulate economic security. What does that mean? The details you'll find on the inside pages. A good number of economists continue to wonder how, when and how we're going to bridge our economic policies with the realities that people encounter on a daily basis. That's the lead story of the Nigerian News Direct, beg your pardon. How FG plans to boost export with 50 billion naira ESP funding. As according to Awolowo, find out the details of that on page 23 of the paper today. And so many other stories you'll find on the front page. You can choose yourself, but let me give you this one. NAFDAC DG extols contributions of MSMEs to Nigeria's economy. The story is on page 2. And a number of people are still wondering, when are we going to get a homegrown vaccine for COVID-19? That's the Nigerian News Direct today.
New Telegraph has this one. Anxiety as Kanu Igboho appear in Abuja Cotonou court today. That's on the front page. Yoruba groups offer free transportation, accommodation to supporters. Ohaneze, Kanu's council warn against protest, molestation. OYC urges Igbo youths to be in Abuja. Yoruba monarchs in Benin Republic meet over Igboho. So you have all of the stories on pages 3 and 30 of the paper for you. A number of other stories at the bottom here. Kaduna bandits renege on deal. Release 28 instead of 115 pupils after payment of agreed 50 million naira ransom, 5 motorcycles. Oh, the Baptist Church did say they didn't pay any ransom, so maybe this is all the parents. You can imagine 50 million naira. Ordeal, that's according to the parents. Kidnappers abduct ransom bearer in Niger. So even the person who carried the ransom to them was also abducted. Look at this. Federal government extends NIN SIM linkage deadline to October the 3rd. That story is also there. Says 59.8 million Nigerians now have NIN. Okay, that's on the front page. E-transfer. Federal government projects 209.7 billion naira levy in 2022. So that MPC talk is also there too. MPC to hold rate amid growth concerns. That's what the analysts are foreseeing today will come out of the MPC meeting. But let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Take a look at the Vanguard newspaper today. The lead story, Sunday Igboho. Yes, that's it. FG ready with evidences for Beninese court. Stories on page 8. To prevent elusive videos, to present exclusive videos today. Olubadan sends delegation to Cotonou as Yoruba monarchs meet in Benin Republic to discuss his detention. Witch hunting won't stop agitation. YOV blasts FG. Find the details on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper today. How APC cleared Ogun LG polls as Sanwo-Olu greets victorious APC candidates. Find that story on page 9 of the paper today. Again, FG extends NIN SIM linkage deadline to October 31. That story is on page 7. Right above the nameplate, North lacks responsible leadership. That's ascribed to Zamfara governor. The story you'll find on page 7 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Companies manipulate government concessions in 4.8 trillion naira manufacturing exports trade. What's that about? You find it on the inside pages. Only 21% of exports produced locally in Q1 of 2021 reflects shortcomings of manufacturing sector, says ex-LCCI boss. Costly regulatory environment is the main problem. That's according to MAN. This is something that is definitely concerning, and I hope that someone is doing something about this, because if we frustrate production locally, then we can just kiss exports goodbye. Mr. and Mrs. very quickly, and Mr. saying, I can't believe this is happening. My friend in Abraka asked me to come over and pick a check of 10 million naira for the job I did in just 2 weeks. It's magical. And Mrs. says, you're right. Abracadabra is a magic word. And the back page has sports, Olympics, the Tigers lose to Australia again. Basketball, France stuns USA 83-76. Badminton, Nigeria falls to Japan. This is not sounding good for takeoff, but all the details you'll find on the back page of the Vanguard newspaper this morning.
And if I may, I'll just quickly run through the Daily Times for you. They have this one. Kaduna is the late one there. I was a living dead man while my daughter was in captivity. That's according to a parent there, as abductors of 121 students of Bethel Baptist High School released 28, holding back 87. Kidnappers, kidnappers of Niger Islamia school children seize man sent to deliver ransom. When are these children going to come back? The Niger students, I mean, they have been in captivity for way too long. And when you think of their ages, you know, you just can't help but wonder, how are they coping wherever it is they're being held? Are they out in the cold? Are they sleeping on the bare floor? Where precisely are they? But big questions there, and a parent just gives you an insight into a parent's state of mind when your children are taken into captivity. I was the living dead man while my daughter was in captivity. That's the lead headline on the front page of the Daily Times this morning. They have a number of other stories there for you, which I'll leave you to do yourself. Let's leave it there for the Daily Times.
Well, it's definitely better imagined because, trust me, I don't even know how to imagine that. But that's the look at some of the dailies this morning. We're back to take on the issues for the day right after this break. Stay with us.
Well, security is at the forefront of what we'll be discussing today, particularly in light of a report which will be released today. The Tony Blair Institute will be releasing a report on security here on the state of Boko Haram, especially as the country is set to mark 12 years since the incursion of this violent extremist group, which was unleashed in Nigeria 12 years ago. We have with us in our studios this morning Brigadier General Sani Usman, who is a former Director, Army Public Relations. General, you're welcome to Sunrise Dailies this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on your program.
Well, so many, will I say, offshoots of this violent extremism, which has done quite a number on our security agencies and our security apparatus, and also has now, you know, morphed into many, many offshoots, because people are saying that this so-called banditry looks like something that could also have sprang forth from the Boko Haram uprising. Do you agree with them?
Well, I think it is worrisome, like you rightly said, because it beyond the violent religious extremism, we are also experiencing ethnic violent extremism. It's a new norm now. It wouldn't be surprising, actually, if the banditry that we are experiencing in some parts of the country has semblance with the issue of terrorism and insurgency. Take, for instance, the copycat syndrome of abduction of school children. You know, after the Chibok, we had the Tapchi and then Kankara and so on and so forth. So there is every likelihood that there is a kind of connection between the two. More so, if you look at the video footages and the messages they sent across, there is every likelihood that there are semblance. And more so, if you look at it, the Boko Haram, as it was known way back 2009, has kind of branches, so to speak, or splinter groups, you know, apart from Jama'at Ahl Sunnah led by then Shekau, you have the Iswab, and of course you have the Ansaruddin. So there is every likelihood, and there is a kind of some semblance of Boko Haram terrorists in these issues. But to what extent, actually, I cannot say precisely, but it is very disturbing and worrisome too.
In terms of what, the rise of banditry?
Exactly, because look, it is not just banditry. Any security challenge, any security problem should be worrisome to anybody, because it inhibits, so many things in life, freedom of movement, freedom, in fact, right to life and what have you, because you cannot imagine a situation whereby somebody will be abducted and they will start haggling just like they are selling chicken or goat in the market. And beyond that, if you go to Northwest, there are instances where people have been denied the right not just to life, but the right to livelihood, in the sense that they are sending messages that they should not go and farm unless they pay a certain amount of money in the whole, in a country. And, people in the rural area, they are basically subsistence farmers. They just live by that. So, you see, it has to, be worrisome. That's what I mean.
Initially when Boko Haram started, for many, for many years, we're pretty content to say that, okay, it was treated as a security problem, even though there were those who were saying that we needed to treat this with carrot and stick. I don't know what the carrot was going to be, but then the stick we're all aware of, which was a military onslaught. We're pretty content with the fact that it was confined to the northeast of the country. Now we're beginning to see ripple effect, or at least what you've called the copycat syndrome, in parts of northwestern Nigeria, and it seems to be spreading to as far as north central. Look at what is happening in Niger State, and even the abductions that we've seen there as well. There are huge questions as to what is transpiring there. But looking at the ideology itself, which is what this Tony Blair reports, I don't know if you have had the chance to have a sneak peek. There was a press statement released on Friday, and I think there were parts of the report attached to that particular press statement. If you have been able to see a sneak peek of that report, have you been able to see it? I
read the 47-page report.
The 47-page report. Yeah. Did you agree with some of the findings? Because some of the findings were neatly summarized for some of us to take a look at. That if we do not learn the lessons, if no lessons are learned from this Boko Haram violent extremist uprising, it's going to be very difficult to counter insurgency, across the West African region and perhaps even beyond West Africa. What are your thoughts in terms of how we're taking lessons? Are we first in Nigeria taking any lessons from what has happened with Boko Haram in the northeast of the country?
Well, first and foremost, it is no question of whether I have agreed or not, but it is commendable that they have done such a marvelous work and provided solutions to some of the problems or issues raised. However, there are some lapses in the sense that it has not taken into cognizance some of the developments, particularly the local issues. Take, for instance, they were talking about counter-narrative re-radicalizations and all the rest of them. But I know for sure at both federal and state level, a lot has been done, and I know the military also have a radio station and all the rest. Such things have not been captured in that report. But that's notwithstanding. Talking about whether we have learned lessons, of course we have. And it has brought to a fore so many things, the dynamics of the insurgency as it is, and its funding, the resilience, and of course the effort being made by the Nigerian state to counter, the terrorism and insurgency as it were, right from the federal government, the state, and of course the military. Take, for instance, at strategic level, you look at the level of partnership between the Nigerian state and the neighboring countries. At the initial stage, it was not so. And of course, their attitudes, left so much to be desired, because they look at it as more or less like a Nigerian problem, not till when President Buhari came in 2015 and decided to be a rallying point. But unfortunately, we did not even learn a lesson to the point that there should have been follow-up to this effect. And beyond that, again, the importance of some variables, socio-economic variables. Take, for instance, the role of religion, the role of ethnicity. And if you look at going back to history, bulk of the catchment areas or the epicenter of Boko Haram was the old Kanem Borno Empire. And if you look at the makeup of the ranks of the Boko Haram terrorists, almost 80-something% were of Kanuri extraction, and they took advantage of it. Look at how Muhammad Ali took advantage of being in exile in Cameroon and become a rallying point, and of course establish a splinter group and what have you. So these are the issues. Then beyond that, again, the importance of local populace in terms of funding insurgency, because these people, they blend with the society. Unlike the military that, they have identifiable features, except if you come across with an insurgent that is armed, you won't even know. He will even live within the society and yet go out and commit havoc. There's so many things. And then again, the issue of funding of the security forces, the role of the media is particularly the social media, and the issue of taking holistic approach to some of these security challenges. It is not. If you
let us dissect, because a lot of the issues you're raising now, you're raising them together. But if we were to pick them one after the other, if we agree that Boko Haram, the reason why it's been very difficult to stem the tide, and it will seem the wave of Boko Haram, whatever word you want to use, is because it is essentially an ideology.
Correct.
An ideology that it would seem that largely we have done very well in trying to terminate the lives or neutralize, as the military likes to say, neutralize those who believe in this ideology. But the question is, what efforts have we really made in neutralizing or watering down the ideology itself? Because that, it seems to be where the challenge is. That extremist ideology, which is, which seems, a lot of people have said this is not Islamic. It is not Islamic at all. But there are people who say, oh, this has won the gab of being Muslim, so to speak. The people who are perpetrating this thing say that they're Muslim. They pray, they fast, they do all manner of things. But right at the heart of it, those who truly practice the religion say this is not in tandem with the religion. So as a people, have we shied away from confronting the idea, that Salafist ideology, which is firing this violence, extremism here in Nigeria, and how they are also copying this from other parts of the world? Are you seeing any parallels that we're following in that regard?
Yeah, I made mention of, counter narrative and, of course, radicalization. Ideally, the state is supposed to lead in this area, because basically we have to situate the Boko Haram insurgency in proper perspective and context. Ideology plays a very significant role, but then we have to also look at the issue of good governance. To what extent, education, the level of literacy in the society, employment, and all what have you. At the initial stage, we have had instances whereby well-educated people were carried away, and where the Salafist factor come into play. They join them up. But as time goes on, bulk of the ranks and files of all these Boko Haram insurgents, they are neither properly educated in Islamic way, and nor were they educated in the Western way. Bulk of them, of course, if you look at the Operation Sub-Corridor that they have in Gombe, bulk of them, they don't even know how to pray. So, the insurgents took advantage of this gap in terms of our educational system too. So, if you are dealing with this issue of ideology, you have to put it also in the right perspective. The issue, you have to address the educational gap, the level of poverty, because, not just poverty of ideas, but the fact that people are improvised in the sense that, they tend to give them material benefit to lure them in. Then you look at also the cultural affinity and the religious factor, because if you look at it, they were so clever. They are taking advantage of the position of Borno as the the Center for Islamic Learning, and all these things. So when you are coming up with counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency efforts, you have to take all those into cognizance. The issue of ideology and what are those things that water or helps it in flourishing. The issue of education, the issue of cultural affinity, the issue of religious affinity, and of course the Salafist idea that you have said. And thankfully, reports of that nature has shed more light. I think I was reading a book, The Paradox of Boko Haram. It seems to have reinforced the idea or what people neglected before, because there were so many assumptions which truly they were not exactly the same. Contrary to what they were saying, Muhammad Yusuf was trained in Saudi Arabia. No, he was, yes, going on pilgrimage might have played a key role. There were instances where he stayed for about 5 months, but there were no instances, evidence to prove that he was trained, and the relationship even with the Mid-Eastern part of, the insurgency. Take, for instance, people were saying that he was trained this and that, but it is not true. The issue is the issue of ideology, the universality of it, the kind of sense of belonging, and that is why you have the you have the the allegiance to ISIS and the splinter group of ISWAP, etc. So basically, ideology is equally key. And before you think of solution to the problem, you have to look at all those contexts.
How aggressive would you say the Nigerian state has been in countering that ideology? Yes, You've stated all the other factors that make it particularly difficult to be able to counter the ideology, the challenges, the fact that, there is a cultural affinity, there is poverty of the mind and also or financial poverty as well. There is a lack of education, etc., etc. However, knowing that these are the challenges, one would also think that if we realize what the challenges are, we should also go after them as aggressively as we would go after it militarily. 12 years down the line, would we say that we have learned that these are some of the challenges that are confronting, fighting this ideologically, and have also been able to, put up a resistance of some sort in the areas that have been affected, or at least in the areas we know could be vulnerable to this sort of ideology?
Yeah, well, I think it is no question of aggression. I think we should be systematic in the sense that insurgency is fluid and dynamic, and as it rises, we should be above the water, way ahead of them.
But we're not, are we?
Well, to some extent, we have done marvelously well. If you look at it compared to what we, other countries experience, take, for instance, what is happening in Afghanistan, United States and the coalition and what have you, and Nigeria almost single-handedly, except for the fact that the coalition of the multinational joint task force and Lake Chad Basin Commission, we have done pretty well. Because if you look at way back 2009, 2010, 11, 12, up to 14, what was going on and what is happening now, I think we have done very well. But there is still room for improvement. And how do you improve on that? I think we should emphasize vis-a-vis the kinetic and non-kinetic aspects. Kinetic in the sense that instead of the aggression you are talking about, we should also consider other factors. Take, for instance, mighty as America is still on the negotiating table outside the theater of operation in Afghanistan with the Taliban. Now, to what extent have we explored other aspects? And again, the issue of partnership, strategic partnership. Take, for instance, now we are surrounded by Francophone-speaking countries, and even without Boko Haram, to what extent have we addressed our educational system to include French language as one of our lingua franca in the country, particularly those in those states that are neighboring Cameroon, Chad, and Benin, and Niger Republic. These are issues because language plays a very decisive factor. Then again, to what extent have we built on the diplomatic shuttle embarked on the president? There are other components of the government that they should be talking to their counterparts. And that is why, so much as the multinational joint task force is doing the best it could, it is not good enough in the sense that the level of synergy of effort and cooperation administration is not being, followed the way it is supposed to be. Then again, we look at the funding of the security forces. But even before you even talk about that, I talked about holistic approach, because the kinetic aspect or the military aspect in the counter-insurgency effort is more or less like just 40%. So what constitutes the 60%? The 60% we have not fully exploited the role of the state. You have the military doing virtually almost everything, civil, military, quick impact projects and, insertions and what have you. I think the state ought to have. And beyond that, again, the radicalization program, which even started way back, predates this administration, is more or less like military-driven, which is not supposed to be. So there are so many things that we should, release the military, let other components of Nigerian society be doing it. Then we look at the funding of the military. Then, of course, tasking itself, not just for the military, but the other security agencies also, and other components of Nigerian state. To what extent are they contributing to the solution of this problem? And we will also look at the intelligence and information gathering system. There is concept of war economy. Now, if you look at it, in Borno State alone, I think we have about 200 non-governmental organizations, both local and international, and their pay is commensurate to the risks they are taking. So somewhere, somehow, somebody is benefiting to the detriment of Nigerian society. If you look at it, it's more or less we are working across purposes. So there is need to streamline it, because some of them have started to even abuse the essence of why they have been there. So many things. But the most important thing also is the issue of good governance. I'm not praising anybody, but if you look at what is happening in Borno State within the last 2 years, give you a kind of hope. And if you look at the role poor infrastructure played in some of the security challenges, you will understand what I mean. That key to all these things is the fact that we have to improve in good governance. Let's have real dividends of democracy in terms of infrastructural development, educational facilities, healthcare facilities, and people should have a sense of belonging so that they have affinity and they will not associate themselves with these criminals.
Let's quickly go to Lagos now. I know that my colleague has a question for you. Ayo.
Well, thank you, Mark. You would agree with me that this is like a whole symposium on its own. Just looking at this document, But General, one of the things that you said, the most central of them for me, which of course is also reflected in that document, is that we are fighting a war of ideologies. Well, we should be taking a break shortly, but maybe we can just begin the conversation. It would sound to me, it does sound to me like it's because there is an absence of a particular ideology that another ideology could erode. Consequently, we've had this now for so many years. So if there is going to be any solution, according to part of the recommendations, we need to have a counter idea that is stronger than this one. And of course, it is true, it predates this administration. So I'm just wondering, how do you think we can even begin to couch an ideology that's all-embracing, that all Nigerians can own? Because it's not just Boko Haram that is, responsible for all of this insecurity, clearly, and the Boko Haram is just one of them. So many other elements, other components are responsible for all kinds and all levels of insecurity all over the nation. If I ask you to start responding, I will not be able to take our break. So if you don't mind, just give us a few seconds. Let's take a few messages, and we'll be right back. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. General, you said earlier that the state should play the lead. And in terms of ideology, then that ideology should come from government, right? What should the ideology be, especially for such a state as Nigeria?
Well, the simple and short answer is that the ideology should be Nigerian ideology. We are a conglomeration of so many ethnic groups, languages, and what have you. we are heterogeneous. So we should come out with something that will give everybody a sense of belonging, in the sense that a Nigerian ideology could have been better. Beyond what we have in the constitutional provision, we the people, what does the Nigerian state aspire to be beyond, have security and welfare of the people? We should aspire to something that the average youth and every Nigerian should identify with, and give them kind of leverage that they can aspire and be proud of being Nigerians. So apart from the fundamental objectives, encouraging integration and all the rest, so we should think of what is unique about Nigeria. We have had instances where we had uniting factors. Take, for instance, the sports. In those days when you make mention of Nigeria, the first thing that comes into your mind is the issue of football. But that is no more. Not even the jollof rice that we are talking about. There are other countries that are competing with Nigerian jollof rice. So we should be seen to aspire to other things that will identify us, that will give us sense of pride and belonging as Nigerians. And honestly, we have all that it takes. All we need to do is to harmonize what we have, because each of the indigenous societies, they have very good cultures that are tolerant and dynamic. So we harmonize that, and you will have a kind of Nigerian ideology that will be good, that everybody will identify with, either within the country or outside the country. And the average Nigerian is peace-loving, had this sense of brotherhood among themselves. So all this bulk of what we have been seeing, they are artificial. Once there is a sense of direction, I can tell you the ideology will come up. But beyond that, again, we have to look at so many issues. Take, for instance, the religious affinity or ethno-religious affiliations and what have them. There are good, some of them, but there are those that are bad. And those were the building blocks of this, extremists. And we have to make sure that it doesn't, outweigh the Nigerian state. And I can give you an example. In Sierra Leone, the average Sierra Leonean knows how to, whether he's a Muslim or he's a Christian, he knows how to recite the Lord's Prayer. And they know how to recite the 3 surahs in the Holy Quran. So it's immaterial whether you are a Muslim or you are a Christian, you are a Sierra Leonean. And going just recently, Rwanda, you will be embarrassing a Rwandese by the time you ask him which ethnic group he belongs to or which God he worships. And those are the kind of value system we should inculcate in Nigerians, so that they will think of themselves as Nigerian before any extraneous variables that he comes from a particular, or he worships a particular God, or he comes from a particular society. So their loyalty is to the Nigerian state.
Well, what you have just said now also underscores something. I mean, it's almost like saying there is hardly any ideology that is stronger than the religious one. And to imagine that, the religion is being exploited, especially by preachers, according to that, document that you said you've read all 47 pages. One of the findings, for instance, is that preachers glorified historical events and played into anti-establishment public sentiment, pitting populations against their official representatives. That's pretty much saying that the trust in the government is greatly depleted, and this trust is being exploited by these, extremists and dissidents and all of that. How can we even begin to redress that? You already made it clear that it predates this government and everyone is aware of that. How can we begin to address that, the gap of trust between the governed and their government?
Well, I made mention of it much earlier. I talked about dividends of democracy and good governance. Those are the deciding factor. And we are seeing it in so many states. Take, for instance, in Borno State. What is happening there? There is sincerity of purpose. So much infrastructural development, and in fact, the leadership there is so transparent to the point that people identify with it. So I can tell you, if we can reflect that in other parts of Nigerian state, and continue and build it up. And it cascade downward up to local government and what level, I think those issues will just come in naturally. But the starting point, honestly, is to improve in good governance. Let there be, improvement in the welfare of the people in terms of infrastructural development. And apart from that, also, leadership should be accountable, should be transparent, and give people sense of belonging, because the whole essence of it is for the people. So if you have all those things, I can rest assure you, Nigerians, I always mention it anywhere, any day, they are marvelous people, they are wonderful people. All they need is the right people to lead them, and you can see that they will get the best out of them.
Rightly said, there are Nigerians. So I'm just wondering, how we can bring them back, within the shortest possible time. For instance, one of the items there, says that most of the donations that these dissidents get come from within the country. There are local community members funding them. And this is also clearly something that I'm just wondering, how difficult can it be to track these individuals and arrest all of their activities if most of what they do, most of their successes come from within the country? How difficult can it be for us to track them and deal with them and cut down their activities?
I think it's not an issue of difficulty. How do we go about doing that, and which is very good. And if you look at that report very critically, most of the people that contributed, especially at the very beginning, some of them did that voluntarily, knowing fully well what it is meant for, but some of them did so unconsciously because they come at different, under various guises, in the name of Islam and what have you. But people are wiser, and more so now, there are legislation, look at the Terrorism Prevention Act, that talked about funding insurgency in whatever, manner, and you look at the Financial Intelligence unit. So these are things that we should, and it is not just about Islam. It cut across all religious divide. Take, for instance, there are people that give their churches humongous amount of money. Where do they come? How do they come about that amount of money and all the rest of the things? So it's issue of accountability. It's issue of, people being honest with themselves. That will help the security agencies and the government in doing its job properly. But at the same time, again, we should take advantage of the situation we found ourselves by being honest with ourselves, by telling us the truth. Telling ourselves the truth. Because we have not been talking with ourselves, rather we have been talking to ourselves. And of course, there are more than enough government agencies that could do that we leverage on. And take, for instance, even the National Orientation Agency. To what extent have we taken advantage of it? And it is not just at federal level, it has branches across the state and across the local government. And beyond even the National Orientation Agencies, almost all the security agencies and almost all the political parties, particularly the major ones, they have people at work. To what extent are we inculcating value system? To what extent are we mentoring our youth? To what extent are we giving, accountable and transparent leadership? Are we being honest with ourselves and those large or teeming followership? These are the issues that you have to look at. And you can rest assured that the funding, and I made mention earlier on about the fact that the role of local populace in the sustenance of insurgency, because look at the ethnic cleavages, look at the religious cleavages. Sometimes they will not know that they are doing it. I could recall there is a particular community, not till when the security agencies found out, mothers will carry haversack as if they are going to, fumigate their farms, not knowing that actually they carry foodstuff that they will go and drop in the bush because their children were involved. So these are the kind of things, and they know that these children, what they are doing is not good for the society.
All right, General.
And beyond that, again, look at even the banditry we are having now.
Yeah.
It is simply because some of them, they are funding youth, with menial,
Just
opportunities.
Yes. Just one quick one.
A loan of 50,000.
Yeah, just one quick one, General. You know, as I said, there's so much to unpack on this, but, you know, there are also concerns all over the place about, you know, the sincerity of government, in a manner of speaking. For instance, the previous government, President Jonathan, you know, during his government said that there was an infiltration of some of these elements in his government. Is there any chance that there is such a system still perpetuated right now that we may or may not be aware of?
Well, I wouldn't know because you need to have concrete evidence. What so far as to mention that in those years we wasted so much time in terms of conspiracy theory, and it is not supposed to be so.
Okay, I'm wondering.
I do not know if I.
Well, I just wanted to, you know, be sure that, I mean, as you said, we're not just playing to the gallery again, because the rumors are there, and it would seem like government is not making any concrete moves to debunk some of these rumors that are flying around, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, well, it depends on the rumor. If only you can mention one or two, possibly with the little I know, possibly I might have an answer to that. But kindly be specific, then I think we will address it squarely.
Well, as I said, there are rumors, so if they are not founded, then why talk about them? Because, I mean, just one of those things is the one that I just talked about now, about the former government saying, you know, things like that. But then you also talked about the fact that we need to capitalize on education, unemployment, and all those things. And the president has made several pronouncements about that. I'm just wondering if you think we are really, really serious about those soft, you know, solutions that you mentioned earlier.
Well, if you recall, earlier on when we were having the conversation here with Maupe, I mention the issue about follow-up and synergy of efforts. And I think there is so much to be done in that regard.
You know, let me quickly look at some of the findings and some of the recommendations they are making. You know, normally when there are divisions within a house, you know, we tend to rejoice because we believe oftentimes that a divided house cannot stand. Sadly, this hasn't proven the same with Boko Haram. It will seem that the more it's been divided, even though it might not be standing internally, the more violent it has been on the Nigerian populace. You agree with that?
Well, violence has always been their stock interest, so it's not surprising. But
I'm looking at this particular finding, which is finding number 9, that factional splits led to more, not less violence with Boko Haram's ideology, which was retained despite the divisions. So the recommendation is to not mistake factional disputes and changes in leadership as operational crisis for terrorist groups. How quickly have we been able to imbibe those lessons? Because that came to the fore recently when it was rumored, we're not sure now, Shekau has had more than how many lives, when it was rumored that he's been taken out by ISWAP. And there are those who were rejoicing, but there are those who were saying, who were cautioning that if ISWAP was indeed the one responsible for taking out Shekau, then we need to be more cautious. In fact, we need to be more careful as a people because that particular group is deemed to be more violent and more strategic in terms of how it engages. What are your thoughts on that, quickly?
Well, I think the thing people should understand is that without prejudice to the efforts of the military, they are doing very well. I could remember when there was a leadership crisis. In fact, when we had information about the death of Shekau, I broke the news. And I said, well, it's subject to confirmation. Eventually, even those who official or unofficial spokesmen for them eventually confirmed that information. But that notwithstanding, and the lesson in that was that the military took advantage of that skirmish, because there were horse trading here and there, and the Air Force marvelously took out quite a number of the key leaders. It's just that information is not forthcoming from their end. So we are learning so much, and nobody is taking anything for granted. The fact that there are splinter groups, and even when ISWAP was born out of the Boko Haram, nobody has taken it for granted, because the issue of ideology and the fact that they are is just question of principles of targeting, indiscriminate targeting of all humanity as against those they term as legitimate target between, the ISWAP and the Shekau faction of that time. But nobody is taking it for granted, the fact that, so this recommendation and many other things, and some of the recommendations I even found that they tend to emphasize on the role of the international community as against the fact that we, yes, we have the capacity to deal with this problem. On the understanding, again, there are issues that need, cooperation of our neighboring, countries, more cooperations. Take, for instance, we have to really improve.
Well,
in terms
some
of
people argue that is because of how the report itself is couched, is how, how to get lessons or getting lessons from the violent extremism that Boko Haram has become in Nigeria. That's what it's about. I don't think the lessons will be for us. Yes, we can get lessons from it, but it's for other people to learn, just what mistakes we made and perhaps what progress we're also making as well.
I think it's all encompassing. I think specifically most of the recommendations are targeted towards the Nigerian state and other, world leaders and key policy makers or decision makers. And it depends on to what extent it has affected you, so you pick whatever is relevant to you or not. And really we have to commend them for such a marvelous effort, and that is how it's supposed to be. And I expect such things to have even come from the Nigerian state, because we should be able to take stock, of the various components, not just the military. I know the military, apart from even at the unit level, they have war diary and record keeping, but nationally, to what extent have we been taking stock? Kind of with the benefit of hindsight, what is it that we have been doing very well and to keep on improving on it? What is it that we have not been doing very well? And how do we leverage on those, areas that seems to assist us? And to what extent have we invest, in technology? Because whether we like it or not, the world has moved on. We are talking about jointness and all the rest, but people are talking about atmospheric and cyber warfare and what have you. So these are issues that we have to look at. And honestly, the reports come in handy, but I think we can do better than what they have even done.
Well, let us see how seriously we take the reports and even try to improve even better on the recommendations that have been put forward. We have to thank you very much for your time with us this morning, retired Brigadier General Sani Usman. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on Sunrise Daily. He is former spokesperson of the Nigerian Army. Sunrise Daily will continue in a moment to take on another matter. Please do not go away. Yes, we're going to be looking at the internal crisis within the People's Democratic Party, which is supposed to be the major opposition party in the country. They were in power for at least 16 years before the APC, took over power at the federal level, in 2015. Now, there are questions as to what exactly is happening within the rank and file of the PDP and whether or not they will be able to get their acts together for an upcoming election in 2 years' time. You saw that meeting, the briefing there by the governor of Benue State. It would seem, he says it's just a regular meeting that's been holding, but, there have been talks that all has not been well between the current governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, and the chairman of the PDP, Uche Secondus. And it would seem that the meeting there was an attempt to broker peace between the factions. Before now, there have been huge calls, from some quarters that the NWC, that's the National Working Committee of the PDP, has been largely ineffective and that they ought to resign. The arrowhead of this particular call has been none other than Mr. Kasim Afebwa, who is a former Commissioner for Information in Edo State. You're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
There are others who are also saying that all is well. They just need time to be able to set things straight. We have representing that particular school of thought here, Mr. Sani Umar, who is a former spokesperson of the PDP Presidential Campaign Council. Sir, you're also welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
And good morning, viewers.
Good morning. So tell us what percent, because if you ask those who are in the know, and if you ask those who will speak very frankly with you, they will tell you that all is not well within the PDP, and they're not particularly happy with the kind of opposition politics that the PDP has played so far. What are your thoughts on that?
Let me start by saying that in any organization, even on channels, everything cannot be 100% well here. There must be grumblings here and there. However, it is how the management rises up to the occasion on certain critical issues that matter. Now, when you come to the PDP, I have been a foundation member of the PDP. I have been the administrative secretary of the PDP in my state since 1998. So I am very familiar with the inner workings of the PDP up to this particular point in time. And I must tell you that the party is, as an opposition, has not done badly. If you take a look, the first set of executives that came was the Solomon La Executive Committee. And they were the ones that laid the foundation for the successes of the PDP in electoral contest. However, subsequent leaders of the party have also tried their best. But the Secondos-led National Working Committee has done tremendously well, coming from an opposition, with 11 states to rise up to about 19 states. That is a commendable feat, at least to me. However, the major cause by opponents of the National Working Committee is that some people are decamping from the party, and that is for alignments and realignments. Politics is like that. If we have 3 governors of Ebonyi, Cross Rivers, and Zamfara decamping to the APC, let us not forget also that we had Otom, Waziri Tambuwal, and the governor of Edo State, his own state, decamping to the PDP. So it's a question of alignments and realignment. And that is not to show the failure of the National Working Committee. However, it also shows, because there are component parts of the party that ought to do their work well. We have the PDP Governors Forum. The PDP Governors Forum are supposed to do, critical job to stop their colleagues from leaving the party. So those things cannot be... So you think they're not working as well as they ought to? They are not working as well, because if you take a look at the complaints of those who have left, for instance, the governor of Ebonyi State lumped his blame on the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike.
We'll come to that shortly. Let me quickly take your comments quickly. First, I think it's important to establish that your own party, the PDP in Edo State, say that you're no longer their member, that they have since suspended or expelled you for anti-party activities.
That was a carriage of excess kindness. That wasn't true. My ward executive disowned that. The local government executive disowned that. And by virtue of the provisions of the PDP constitution, they are the ones who have the right to raise queries about my activities, or if they felt that it's not in line with, what the party stipulates. And at any rate, a chairman of the party, as a Gbemi, cannot just sleep and wake up and issue me an expulsion. It has to go through a process. But my worry is not even about expulsion or no expulsion or suspension, all of that. I'm not an employee of the PDP national headquarters. I'm a member of the party. I'm a voter. And so that is more important to me than all these try to rake mud where there is none. Let me just quickly take off from where Umar stopped. And that's to the point that trying to trace the historical antecedents of the party is not what we are talking about. We are in very peculiar, times where we need
forward-looking, result-driven, utility-driven leadership that has his hands on the jar of rendering and delivering solid leadership credentials to be able to position the opposition party in good stead in contestation for power. You see, a democracy flourishes well when there is virile opposition because it is an integral part of the entire democratic process. But where people are sleeping on duty, and you are saying you took the party from 11 states to 19 states, that's complete lie. PDP has 16 governors. Before now, 3 of them have exited. And when they are exiting, in the face of the monstrosity, the leadership inertia, the phlegmatic leadership of the APC-led federal government, promoting hunger and deprivations, creating IDPs all over the country, yet Nigerians who should rather rise up to the occasion are leaving your party and joining the same party of oppressors, people who have been oppressing us. So I find it very disturbing. That's why I sat down and said, come, we need to retool, rejig, and rebrand, repackage the party. This present leadership led by Uche Secondos does not seem to understand the dynamics of the modern day expectations. Nigerians need a party that can resonate hope in an almost hopeless situation that we find ourselves. And it becomes so appalling that a leadership of the party will just sit back and issue statements just go and sit down. No, you must rally around your leaders at the various zonal level, state level, local government level. You must be seen to be going around, encouraging and ensuring that there is a way to connect with the people and the expectations of the people. I'm not into any contestation with anybody, fighting or no fighting. No, mine is to see a vibrant, viable opposition that can contest for power, provide alternative to Nigerians in 2023.
Well, we'll come back and we'll take the views of Mr. Umar on that. Let's take a break now. We'll be back shortly. Please stay with us. The issues bedeviling the PDP, that's the People's Democratic Party, and as an opposition party, the matters we're discussing this morning. And we have with us Mr. Kasim Afrebwa, who was a former Commissioner for Information in Edo State, and we also have Mr. Sani Umar, who is a former spokesperson of the PDP Presidential Campaign Council. Let me quickly throw this. They've given your opening statement on this matter. Let me quickly throw this to Lagos for some opening questions from my colleagues. Ayo.
Well, thank you, Mokwe. One thing that's, all the while, all through the time I've been thinking about this conversation, the question that comes to my mind is one of the issues that Mr. Afegwa raised, and I'd like to take him up on it. In any democracy, the opposition is critical, not just for winning elections, but for ensuring that the government in power does the needful. You would recall the kind of pressure that the opposition gave the PDP while the PDP was in office. To a large extent, many people are wondering, where is the virile, opposition that you talked about, that's supposed to keep the government in power in check and ensure that the needful was done at any given point in time. So many people are now assuming that the opposition is now maybe the media or the CSOs, but they are not supposed to play that role. It's supposed to be that the responsibility of the PDP. Would you say that it's the issues that you have talked about or that you are talking about or that many people may not even be aware of, that's not making the PDP to perform this virile opposition function for our democracy?
Well, thank you very much. I think everything boils down to leadership. And leadership has a lot to offer if actually you are aware and conversant with your, the expectations of the people. If you are, if you know your roles and responsibilities, of midwifing or presiding over an opposition party that has, agenda, that has projects, that has objectives, that has different issues plaguing the country, your own response to them matters a lot because that is the alternate voice that the people would naturally want to see. But I have taken a very critical, very analytical, dissection of the present leadership of the party, and I've come to the conclusion, unequivocally, without fear of favor, that the present leadership, masterminded or presided by Prince Uche Secondus and some other members on NWC, do not understand, their responsibilities, and they cannot connect the dots of a new generation opposition party that should naturally put the party in government in check. I said this with all due sense of responsibility from the point of view that even our response to issues plaguing us, insecurity, economic doldrums, unemployment, suffering, deprivations, and so many other ills that have bedeviled us in the recent past, in the last 6 years, the PDP leadership presently constituted do not seem to connect what Nigerians really want or what its role is with what the expectations are. So even my friend here will agree that the party is there. The party is bigger than any individual, but the individuals drive the party. But when that driving force is not there,
well, just 1 second, Mr. Fegwa.
You'll be a leadership inertia.
Is that to say, is the silence of the PDP leadership a way of saying that the PDP does not have answers to those issues that you have raised bedeviling the country?
They have answers to them, but they don't have the political will on how to deliver the message. And that is why I'm calling for a new, vibrant, forward-looking leadership that can speak to the issues. The issues are germane. They are all over the place. There are issues that we see every day. We contend with them. You just spoke with a man, a retired major, brigadier general, who spoke about the insecurity. He took you around, These are discussions that should occupy the center stage in PDP's own mindset. But when you have a leader, when have you ever seen Prince Uche Secondus on television asking questions like this, my brother? When? Have you ever seen Prince Uche Secondus engaging journalists in an interview one-on-one? Even the PDP publicity secretary should naturally be the secretary of a town union in Kogi State. They are not a national party. National party playing a position where you need to be proactive, you need to deliver the message so that Nigerians will be convinced. In 2015, look at how they were eroded out of power. Because those who presided over the party at that time were weak. Now you brought in another set of leadership that has become almost sleeping on duty.
Okay.
See, I'm not in a regime of trying to issue statements to say this is our position. No. You must assemble your brains, your brains, let them do a workshop, seminars, provoke issues, then come to a recommendation of blueprints. Market these blueprints with Nigerians, tell Nigerians what you do better, what you do differently, so that they will begin to connect to it. Nigeria is becoming almost like a one-party state, and that is what I'm afraid of. I don't want a one-party state. 3 governors existing in your party, so many senators existing, House of Rep members existing. You are just sleeping there like a lame dog.
Well, some people, well, Mr. Fegwa, yeah, just one moment, Mr. Fegwa. So, some other people, as Mr. Umar also said, that the defection has actually been a two-way street, given the news that's been making the rounds. But let me ask Mr. Umar, there was something that you also said the other time, Mr. Umar, when you were talking about the leadership or the management of any organization. Yes, there will always be issues, but, as Mr. Fegwa said, it's in the way the leadership manages the challenge. That is how the issue is resolved. And that's the way it will percolate down the rank and file, as Malkwe also mentioned earlier. So in terms of taking charge of the challenges at the top, how would you say that has been relevant in the scheme of things? Because clearly it would seem like things are falling apart largely, and the center in the PDP is not quite holding.
Well, I think Mr. Fegwa in his own analysis, was a little bit circumspect. And he didn't come out clearly to express the true position of things. But let me also state clearly that the PDP is not only ruled or administered by the National Working Committee. There are layers of the party. You have the National Working Committee, you have the National Executive Committee, and then you have the BOT of the party. So there are layers of the party that come together. We have also the PDP Governors Forum. All these things, all these come together, marshal out plans for the success of the party. So you can't single out the National Working Committee and say that the National Working Committee is not performing. They are all performing, because performance in terms of, it is not the noise you make. If we are talking about noise, the largest person who has made any noise in Nigeria is the former APC chairman, Adams Oshomole. He has made so much noise, but lost so many things, including so many elections. Now, where has the noise taken him to? It is the strategy and the direction that you take that helps you to grow the party. Now, the APC have tabled 3 issues. The issue of insecurity, the issue of corruption, and the issue of the economy. And these are the issues that the PDP is taking them up. And I think the Nigerian masses are with the PDP. What is important is to galvanize the Nigerian masses, and the Nigerian masses are with the PDP. Now, let me give you a clear view of what I'm saying. Now, in Cross River State, the governor is swimming against the tide, because Cross River State is essentially PDP. And there is no way that PDP will lose Cross River State. In Ebonyi State, we have witnessed this thing. Elechi, who was the governor of that state, didn't want this governor, Umahi, to become governor. He wanted the former Minister of Health, of Goodluck, and he couldn't get it, so he decamped to another party, and he worked against the PDP, but he didn't, because he was swimming against the tide. The people there are PDP, essentially. However, when you come to Zamfara State, Zamfara is essentially an AMPP.
Well, Mr. Umar, right, Mr. Umar, given all that you have mentioned, my apologies, given all that you have mentioned, the question on the minds of many right now is, if the PDP, the major opposition party in the country, is as divided as it is, why should Nigerians devolve power to a system such as the PDP that is divided against itself?
No, I don't think there is any division. If there is any division, it will have now, that will be what will have necessitated, because the Constitution says if there is a division, you can now cross over. But there are no divisions in the party. That is why we are pursuing our mandate in Zamfara State, because there is no any division within the PTB. However, you cannot, like I said, you can't stop conflicts from occurring. Take an example. Now, the major issue is between the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, and his compatriot, Uche Secondos. He wants him out. And that is for political expediency and for his own personal interest. However, if you take a holistic look at it, some of the problems that the PDP is facing is largely also the product of the unguarded utterances of the governor of Rivers State. For instance, the governor has attacked the elders of the party. He has threatened the party that if they don't take the national convention of the party to Port Harcourt, he will deal with them. He has, just of recent, spoken very, harshly to a traditional ruler in his own domain. These are issues that they go down with the people. So if the traditional ruler has massive support and then he is addressed like a small boy, how do you expect him and his supporters to come and vote for PDP? So even our leaders should also know what they should say to the masses. They should not, catapult all the problems and then hand it over to the National Working Committee and say the National Working Committee is ineffective, is weak, and it is not
Mr. Omar, just one thing. Just one thing.
Let me correct an impression.
Okay, go ahead.
We have a governor. We had a governor which we lost, Ayo Fayoshe. He was our governor so as at the time Secondos took over, we had 19. Up to the time we had 19. We lost Imo State to courts. Otherwise, we would have had more governors than we have at the moment. So we are not talking about this. If you don't, look at your previous performance, how can you now make progress? We have now looked at our previous performance. Now, as an opposition, what have we been doing? Have we been making progress or have we been retrogressing? Now, decamping from one party or defections from one party to another is not a setback to a political party, because these people who are decamping, mostly, for instance, Cross River and Ebonyi, are second-term governors. By the time they reach maybe 3 years in office, nobody will listen to them, because they have no any use to the people. So the people will now go and do what they want to do. Now the governor of Zamfara State, everybody knows, is looking for a second term.
Well, just one second.
Because he's looking for a second term.
Let's stay on the issues that are, on the front burner right now. You would remember that Mr. Kasim Afegba had raised issues with the PDP, and which he has also invited the authorities, EFCC, ICPC, and all of that. It would seem like the PDP hasn't even responded to those issues at all.
Well, what Mr. Afegba did was to write a petition to the EFCC, claiming that the party has mismanaged what they were able to get during the sales of forms, in 2019, which is about, to him, is about 10 billion. The party has come out with a clear statement that they did not get even 10 billion. What they got was 4.9 billion. And they are ready to render accounts. They will have rendered accounts to the neck of the party. But since he has taken them to the EFCC, they are willing and able, and they are not even afraid. Nobody is afraid of that allegation. It's a mere allegation. It is left for him to prove his allegations, and it is left for the party to come out clean. So that we should leave to the EFCC.
Have to wait
its own investigation.
Did the party have to wait, Mr. Umar? Did the party have to wait for a letter from Mr. Afegba or from anyone else to get, the transparency thing out?
You said what? Come again?
Does the party need to wait for anyone to be transparent? Does the party need to wait before Mr. Afegba would complain before, the needful is done about the finances of the party?
Nobody is complaining. Only Mr. Afegba is complaining. Did you hear any complaint from anybody that somebody has stolen any money in the party? It's only Mr. Afegba that was complaining. And he's my friend. Let me state. He is complaining because he has issues with some of the party members. And if he has issues with some of the National Working Committee members, of course he is as a free citizen and as a bona fide member of the party, he has the right to complain. And his complaint, he can take it to any level. He has taken it now to the EFCC. It is now left for the EFCC to now, to authenticate his complaint or to throw it away.
Let me quickly ask you whether
please, before you ask, let me just respond to
you want to quickly respond to why you're the only one?
Yes,
You agree that you're the only one?
No, I'm not. I'm not the only one. You see, incidentally, Umar Sani is a good friend. We both worked at the Presidential Campaign Council. But you see, he's speaking for those who are, already facing leadership challenges, those who are sinking, trying to clutch at every available flotsam to stay afloat. The ship of the Secondus leadership is already sinking, and that is so. So the easiest and most convenient for them is for them to be dragging people, shifting blames, bringing in Wike, bringing in that, that is not the issues we're talking about. The party is larger than any individual. But where there's a leadership vacuum, where there's gap, you won't be able to connect the dots of what to do. Are
you being fair to the Secondus leadership? Because some people will say that it is your first time in opposition. It's the PDP's first time in opposition. And it might take a while for the party to be able to calibrate itself into an opposition party from a party that, fell out of being in government at the center.
I think there is a more serious thing that we should be doing, both as media practitioners, as stakeholders, as analysts, and all of that. And that is, we should be looking at the all-important position of political parties, because that is the leadership recruitment platform, where somebody who will be your president will have to come from. Somebody who will be your lawmaker will have to come from. Somebody who will be your local government chairman will have to come from. If the party is badly run and not run, with a system that is foolproof in terms of delivering the essentials, we are going to have problems. That's why we end up voting, mediocres into government, and then you continue to complain. You see, whether you are in opposition, whether you are in a ruling party, leadership is leadership. When you give it, you see the difference. They say what makes the difference in all arguments. It's the leadership you offer. Now, the second leadership. If you won 16 governors in 2019 and 3 have left you, you had 47 senators and they are now 37. And you have House of Rep members, you are now 111 out of 360. You are depleting your ranks every day. Should that be cheering news to you as a leader? Shouldn't you sit down and take a critical look at your shortfalls and see how you'll be able to rally around party leaders and other persons so that you can make a headway? Let me tell you this. Umar Sani was talking about the various cadres of leadership. The constitution, the framers of the constitution of the PDP knew from onset that it would be difficult for you to reach out to everybody. That's why they created what they call National Working Committee. Working committee. That means you can meet almost on a daily basis, twice in a week or once in a month, to begin to run, to attempt to run the affairs of the party. The NEC has a procedure for convoking meetings. The board of trustees are just advisory. If they advise and you don't implement, what happens? The governors forum, these are just extra constitutional platforms. They are not recognized in any of the platforms, whether in PDP constitution or in the federal constitution. What we are saying is that as a leader in opposition, you know the issues plaguing Nigerians' mind. You know the suffering in the land. You know the poverty. You know the unemployment rate. You know the killings. You know the bloodshed. Please, what are you doing to offer succor or to even offer alternative that if we're in government, APC is doing this right now, this is what they ought to do. The 2021 budget, what is PDP's position on 2021 budget as represented in Prince Uche Secondus? There's no critical analysis of it. There are no interrogations of the provisions of the subheads, the resources, the 14 trillion that you are going to spend. How is it going to be spent, and all of that? What are the issues? If government is not performing consistently, President Buhari has said that he's receiving less money than people who presided over the country before him. That's a lie. Because if you are selling oil at even $60 of 7 years ago is less in Nigerian value than $60 of today, because the currency is in dollars is for about 504 naira per dollar. So if you have $1,000, it's $1,000 from your oil, you are getting 540,000 in Nigerian currency. So. And you are going to spend in Nigerian currency.
The question is in whose market? Because that's not what the CBN is exchanging. That's not the rate at which the CBN is exchanging.
We are buying dollar everywhere, 504, 505, 506.
Well, that is not the official rate. That is not how much the government of the day is getting it.
These are the issues that PDP should be talking about. These are the issues you are not
These issues have been there before even the current government.
You see, being there does not mean you should not tackle them. It's like somebody saying, go and fight corruption or go and fight armed robbery. You say armed robbery has been there before. Let's hold our hands and watch. It will consume us. We need a strong voice. We need a strong opposition voice. We cannot continue to gloss over all these issues in the name of not trying to ruffle feathers.
I'm just wondering, though, how is this? Because it would seem that you have been single-handed and single-minded as well in your criticism of the leadership of the PDP. How has this been received mainstream within the PDP, which you criticize? Well,
as a result of my criticism and my allegations, my petition to the EFCC and ICPC, EFCC has started investigation, and as a direct response to that, the governors forum are meeting today in Bauchi to look at the issues I have raised. They have also met before now, where they wrote to the EFCC that the EFCC does not have power to come and interrogate the finances of the party. There are also conversations here and there. Even those whom is represented, they are reaching out to me. Please subpedal on this, subpedal on that, you know. We don't want the party to... It is not about the party. It's about those who are leading the party. I want result-driven leadership.
Do you agree? Do you agree that the PDP is not as virile as it ought to be?
If you take...
I'm just asking.
No, let me be very, let me address some issues first. One, you will have heard him saying they are reaching out to him. That means he is a lone voice in the wilderness.
No, I'm the petitioner.
No, you are the lone voice in the wilderness.
I'm the petitioner.
Now, the last time the PDP governor... Now, what the PDP governor said is correct. It is not the EFCC that has the power to investigate. It is the INEC. It's in the Constitution.
Money laundering?
Yes, that's not money laundering.
It's money laundering. I'm a petitioner of money laundering.
You don't have facts to prove that it is money laundering.
Go to EFCC and explain to them.
Well, that's why I don't want to discuss the facts of the matter because it is under investigation. Anything that is under investigation, whatever you say will be prejudicial to the investigation or, sub judice to the investigation. I don't want to talk about...
So quickly, do you agree that the PDP is not as virile as it ought to be?
I want to assure you, Maupe, that the PDP is waxing stronger and stronger in spite of the defections. Forget about defections.
Not about defections.
Yes.
In terms of being an opposition party, would you say that it has been loud enough?
The PDP is largely assisted by the ruling party because if the ruling party has been performing, then the position of the PDP will have been dwindling. But the opposition party is not performing, and the PDP is pointing out all those issues. Now, it is not only about statements.
Well, I think that you've answered my question sufficiently. We're totally out of time. We have to thank both of you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Mr. Kasim Afuegwa is a former commissioner for information in Edo State, and Mr. Sani Umar is a former spokesperson, PDP Presidential Campaign Council. We're totally out of time, but let us see if you can take a mail or two. This is from Demola Lalade talking about PDP's internal wranglings. Says, party wrangling is peculiar to all political parties in Nigeria. Nigerians have been clamoring for a political reform where the internal democracy within the political parties are looked into critically so that elections within those parties to elect representatives are conducted without any interference from party leaders. INEC should take responsibility to conduct those elections. That's from Demola Alalade.
And from Henry on the same issue, PDP should look beyond Mr. Afegwa's language but take seriously his message to wake up from slumber and the days of defeat, leave the petty party and become what Nigerians expect it to be, a virile opposition. The PDP slept when it lost 7 sitting state governors in 2015 and got lost in the wilderness since then. First step is to bring back its super tacticians who were relegated because of lack of power base. They are still very much around.
Oshinowo Kingsley is talking about tackling insurgency. I don't know, insurgency, beg your pardon. I don't know if we still have time, but we have to thank you so much for sending your mails. Yes, okay, it's on the screen now. The inability of the federal government to declare these groups terrorists. Oh dear, did they just take it away? Yes, I was trying to quickly read it from the screen, but that was from Oshinowo Kingsley. A number of others, Isioma Chigbolu, Olagunjo Oladele. Yes, okay. Oshinowo Kingsley's mail is there. The inability of the federal government to declare these groups terrorists is not just disappointing, but shows complacency. They're into kidnappings, killings, terrorizing, raping, and all forms of devilish acts. To keep paying them under the pretext that they're faceless is fallacious. Well, thank you for your mails. We're totally out of time. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for being a part of the conversation this Monday morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Have a wonderful work week. I'm Ayo Makinde.